My name is Sarah John, and I'm 34 years old. While I was burying my 9-year-old son alone, my own family was drinking champagne across town. My mother didn't come to the funeral. Instead, she texted me and said, "Stop being dramatic. This is urgent." She wasn't talking about my son. She was talking about his $950,000 trust fund because she wanted it for my sister's wedding. Before I continue, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, because what my family did after my child died still feels unreal to me, even now. Let me start from the beginning, because the betrayal runs so much deeper than just missing a funeral. My son Daniel was everything to me. Everything. For 9 years, he was my shadow, my laughter, my reason for waking up every morning. He had this way of looking at the world like it was full of magic, collecting rocks he thought were dinosaur eggs, insisting that clouds were actually sleeping dragons. When he smiled, his whole face would light up, and I swear the room got brighter. Daniel got sick in March. Leukemia. The doctors gave us hope at first, talked about treatment options, survival rates, clinical trials. For 8 months, I lived in hospital waiting rooms. I slept in chairs that felt like concrete. I held his hand through chemotherapy sessions that left him so weak he could barely lift his head. But Daniel fought. God, he fought so hard. Even when he lost his hair, even when he couldn't keep food down, he would look at me with those big brown eyes and say, "Mummy, the dragons in the clouds are going to help me get better." My family knew. Of course they knew. My mother came to visit exactly 3 times during those 8 months. 3 times. My sister Jessica came twice, and both visits lasted less than an hour because she had commitments. But they knew how sick he was. They knew the prognosis got worse. They knew when the doctors stopped talking about remission and started talking about comfort care. When Daniel died on November 3rd, I called my mother first. I could barely speak through the sobs, but I managed to tell her that her grandson was gone. You know what she said? "Oh honey, that's terrible. We'll figure out the arrangements later. I have to go. Jessica's having a crisis with the wedding planner." A crisis with the wedding planner. My son had just died in my arms, and my mother was worried about centerpiece colors. The funeral was set for November 8th, 5 days later. 5 days to plan a service for my baby boy, to write words that could somehow capture 9 years of pure joy and love, to figure out how to say goodbye to the only thing in this world that truly mattered to me. I called everyone: my mother, my sister, my aunts, my cousins. I sent texts with the details. I even offered to have someone pick up my mother since she claimed her car was having issues. The responses were creative. My mother said she was feeling under the weather and didn't want to risk getting sick. My sister Jessica said she had a final dress fitting that couldn't be rescheduled because the seamstress was going out of town. My aunt Linda claimed she had to work. My cousin Mike just never responded at all. On the morning of November 8th, I sat in the front row of that funeral home and stared at 27 empty chairs. 27. I counted them while the pastor talked about Daniel's beautiful spirit. I stared at those empty chairs while they played his favorite song, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," because he used to say that's where the dragons lived. I held it together while they lowered his tiny casket into the ground. But inside, I was screaming. Daniel's teacher came. His pediatric nurse came. The janitor from his school came. 3 neighbors I barely knew came. But my own mother, my only sister, they couldn't be bothered. I drove home from the cemetery alone. I sat in my empty house and felt the silence press down on me like a physical weight. That's when I started seeing the social media posts. Jessica had posted 17 pictures from her engagement party. The engagement party that happened on November 8th, the same day I buried my son. There was my mother in a bright pink dress, raising a champagne flute and beaming at the camera. There was my sister in white, surrounded by flowers and laughter. The caption read, "Celebrating love and new beginnings. So grateful for family who shows up when it matters. Number, engaged life. Number, family first. Number, blessed beyond measure. Family who shows up when it matters." I stared at that caption until the words burned into my retinas. I scrolled through the comments. Dozens of people congratulating them, talking about how beautiful the party looked, how happy they seemed. My mother had commented, "My baby girl deserves the world. This is just the beginning of her fairy tale. Love wins. Love wins." On the day I buried my son, my mother was posting about love winning. If you're watching this and you can't believe people like this actually exist, please hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're from. I need to know I'm not alone in thinking this is insane. The text message came at 11:47 p.m. that same night. I was lying in Daniel's bed, holding his favorite stuffed dragon, when my phone buzzed. The message was from my mother. "Sarah, I know today was hard, but we need to talk about practical matters. Stop being dramatic about the funeral thing. This is urgent. Jessica's wedding is in 6 weeks, and we've run into some financial issues. We need to access Daniel's trust fund temporarily. It's family money anyway, and Jessica's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We can sort out the details later." 2. I read that message 7 times. Stop being dramatic about the funeral thing. The funeral thing. Like burying my child was just some minor inconvenience I was making too big a deal about. But then I read the rest of it, and something cold and hard settled in my chest. Daniel's trust fund. The $950,000 trust fund that my ex-husband's father had set up for Daniel's education and future. The money that was meant to give my son opportunities, to pay for college, to help him build a life. The money that was now sitting there, waiting for a child who would never need it. I didn't respond to the text that night. I couldn't. I just stared at it until the words blurred together. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. My mother called 6 times before I finally answered. "Sarah, honey, I know you're grieving, but we really need to discuss this situation with Daniel's money. Jessica's wedding venue is demanding payment, and we've already put deposits down on everything. The dress alone cost $8,000, and that's not even including alterations. We're talking about her dream wedding here. This is her one shot at having the perfect day." I listened to her talk about dress costs and venue payments while I sat in my kitchen, looking at Daniel's empty chair at the breakfast table. His Spider-Man placemat was still there. His favorite cereal bowl was still in the sink, unwashed, because I couldn't bring myself to clean it. "The trust fund isn't supposed to be touched unless it's for Daniel's benefit," I said quietly. "Well, Daniel doesn't need it anymore, does he?" my mother snapped. "And Jessica is family. Daniel would have wanted his aunt to be happy. You're being selfish, Sarah. This family has been through enough stress with your situation, and now you're going to ruin Jessica's wedding over money that's just sitting there doing nothing?" My situation. She called my son's death my situation. "I need time to think about it," I told her. "Think about what? It's not even really your decision. I'm sure there's a way to access the funds as his grandmother. Daniel's father isn't even in the picture anymore. You can't just hoard money out of spite." That's when I hung up. Over the next week, the pressure intensified. Jessica called me crying, explaining how she'd always dreamed of a perfect wedding, how she'd been planning this for 2 years, how all her friends were expecting this amazing celebration. She told me that the family was already struggling financially because of all the stress from Daniel's illness and death. She said that using the trust fund would just be borrowing, that they'd pay it back after the wedding, that it was the right thing to do for family. My aunt Linda left me a voicemail saying I was being unnecessarily difficult, and that Daniel wouldn't want his death to ruin his aunt's happiness. My cousin Mike sent a text saying that holding on to the money was selfish, and that I needed to think about the living instead of dwelling on the dead. Dwelling on the dead. My 9-year-old son had been gone for 2 weeks, and they accused me of dwelling. But the message that broke something fundamental inside me came from my sister herself. It was a long, rambling text that started with fake sympathy and ended with pure manipulation. "Sarah, I know you're hurting, and I'm so sorry about Daniel, but he's gone now, and we have to focus on the future. My wedding is about new life, new beginnings, new hope. Isn't that what Daniel would have wanted? For his family to celebrate love and happiness? The trust fund money could give me the wedding of my dreams, and then maybe we can all start healing together. Please don't let your grief make you vindictive. Don't let Daniel's last impact on this family be negative. I've already told everyone about the venue and the flowers and everything. You can't let me down now. Family takes care of family. The wedding of her dreams, built on my dead son's money." That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and every document related to Daniel's trust fund. I read through the legal paperwork my ex-father-in-law had drawn up 6 years earlier. I studied every clause, every stipulation, every condition, and that's when I found it. The clause that would change everything. If you think my family had the right to demand this money, or if you think I was wrong for what I did next, let me know in the comments. And please subscribe if you want to hear how this story ends, because what I discovered about the trust fund was exactly what I needed. The trust fund had very specific conditions. The money was designated solely for Daniel's education, health, and welfare until he reached the age of 25. If Daniel died before the age of 18, the entire fund would be donated to children's cancer research, with one exception. If Daniel's surviving parent chose to establish an educational scholarship in his name, they could petition the court to redirect the funds for that purpose. There was absolutely no provision for family members to access the money. None. The fund was untouchable by anyone except Daniel himself, or in the event of his death, it would automatically transfer to charity unless I took specific legal action within 60 days. My mother had no claim to it. Jessica had no claim to it. Nobody had any legal right to touch a single penny of that money except me, and only if I chose to create a scholarship program in Daniel's memory. But there was more. There was a clause I hadn't noticed before, buried deep in the legal language. Any attempt to illegally access or claim the trust fund would trigger an immediate investigation by the probate court. Any family member who made false claims about being entitled to the money could face legal consequences for attempted fraud. My mother had been talking about accessing the fund as his grandmother. Jessica had been telling people the money was family money. They were both making claims they had no legal right to make, and they were doing it with the confidence of people who assumed I was too grief-stricken to think clearly. They were wrong. I spent the next 2 weeks researching family lawyers, reading about trust fund regulations, and documenting every single conversation I'd had with my family about the money. I saved every text message, every voicemail, every social media post. I took screenshots of Jessica's engagement party, photos, the ones from Daniel's funeral day. I printed out my mother's Facebook comments about love winning and family showing up. And then I waited. Jessica's wedding was planned for December 19th. By the first week of December, the pressure from my family had become relentless. They called daily. They sent texts hourly. They even started showing up at my house unannounced. My mother came by on December 3rd with a stack of wedding magazines and a folder full of receipts. She spread everything across my kitchen table, like she was conducting a business meeting. "Look at what we've already committed to," she said, pointing to vendor contracts and payment schedules. "The flowers alone are $12,000. The photographer is $8,000. We've put down deposits on everything, and the final payments are due this week. Jessica's dress cost more than most people's cars. We're talking about $75,000 in total expenses, and that's being conservative." I stared at the receipts. $75,000 for one day, for a party. While I was still finding Daniel's socks in the laundry and crying every time I opened the refrigerator and saw his leftover juice boxes. "You planned a $75,000 wedding without having the money to pay for it?" I asked. "We had the money," my mother said defensively. "But then there were unexpected expenses, with Daniel's medical bills, and Jessica's fiancé's business had some setbacks. And, well, life happened. That's what family is for, Sarah. We help each other. Daniel's trust fund is just sitting there earning interest. It makes perfect sense to use it temporarily." "Temporarily. Of course, temporarily. We're not stealing from Daniel's memory, honey. We're honoring it by making sure his aunt has the perfect wedding. Think about how proud he would be to know his money helped create such a beautiful celebration." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab those ridiculous receipts and shred them into confetti. I wanted to explain to my mother that Daniel used to save his allowance in a piggy bank so he could buy me flowers for Mother's Day. And the idea of him being proud to fund a lavish party for the aunt who couldn't be bothered to visit him in the hospital was beyond obscene. Instead, I did something my mother didn't expect. I smiled. "You're right," I said quietly. "We should honor Daniel's memory. Let me think about the best way to handle this." My mother's face lit up with relief and triumph. "Oh, sweetheart, I knew you'd come around. Jessica is going to be so thrilled. This is going to be the wedding of the century, and Daniel will be part of it in spirit." After she left, I called the law firm that had handled Daniel's trust fund. I made an appointment with the senior partner for December 10th. I explained the situation, provided copies of all the communications from my family, and asked about the process for establishing a scholarship fund in Daniel's name. The lawyer, Mrs. Patterson, was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to everything without interruption, occasionally taking notes. "Mrs. John," she said when I finished, "I need you to understand something. Your family members have no legal claim to this money whatsoever. What they're asking you to do isn't just inappropriate, it's potentially illegal. If they've been telling other people they have rights to these funds, they could be charged with fraud." "I know," I said. "And you understand that once you establish the scholarship fund, the money will be gone permanently. There won't be any way to access it for personal use later." "I understand." Mrs. Patterson studied my face for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" I thought about Daniel's empty chair at the breakfast table. I thought about the 27 empty chairs at his funeral. I thought about my mother posting about love winning while I buried my son alone. I want to set up the scholarship fund, I said, but I want to time the announcement for maximum impact. Mrs. Patterson raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I want to wait until December 18th, the day before the wedding. I want to make sure my family fully commits to their plans first. That's quite calculated. My family taught me the value of timing, I said. They taught me that on the day I buried my 9-year-old son. Please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. Because what happened next still gives me chills, and I'm the one who planned it. The week before Jessica's wedding was a masterclass in escalating desperation. My phone rang, constantly. Family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to check on me, and casually mention how excited they were for Jessica's big day. Everyone had an opinion about what I should do with Daniel's college fund. On December 15th, my Aunt Linda showed up with a bottle of wine and a folder full of printed emails. Sarah, honey, I brought copies of all the vendor confirmations for Jessica's wedding. Look at this. She spread the papers across my coffee table. The caterer needs final payment tomorrow. The florist is threatening to cancel if they don't receive payment by Friday. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about our family's reputation. Our family's reputation. The same family that couldn't spare 2 hours to attend a child's funeral. Jessica's been crying for days, Linda continued. She's been planning this wedding for 2 years, and now she might have to call it off because you're being stubborn about money that Daniel can't even use. Don't you think you've punished everyone enough? Punished everyone enough. As if my grief was some sort of revenge plot against them. On December 16th, Jessica herself showed up with her fiancé, Mark. I hadn't seen Mark since Daniel's diagnosis. He'd made it clear that hospitals made him uncomfortable, but there he was on my doorstep, looking nervous and awkward. Sarah, Jessica said, her eyes red and puffy. I'm begging you. Please don't let my wedding be ruined because of money. I know Daniel would want me to be happy. I know he'd want our family to come together and celebrate something beautiful, instead of just focusing on sadness. Mark nodded along uncomfortably. Yeah, and we've already sent out 200 invitations. People are flying in from across the country. My parents have spent thousands on travel arrangements. If we cancel now, we're not asking for much, Jessica continued. Just enough to cover the final payments. Maybe $50,000. That's not even half of what's in the trust fund. We'll pay it back, I swear. Mark's business is going to take off next year, and we'll be able to pay back every penny with interest. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was wearing a designer purse that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her engagement ring was a 3-carat diamond that could have funded a semester of college for a deserving student. She was standing in my living room, where Daniel's toys were still scattered across the floor, asking me to fund her fairy tale with my dead son's money. I'll think about it, I told her. Think about it? Jessica's voice rose to a near shriek. Sarah, the wedding is in 3 days. There's no time to think about it anymore. I need an answer right now. I said I'll think about it. Mark put his hand on Jessica's arm. Babe, let's go. She's obviously not going to help us. After they left, Jessica sent me a text. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope ruining my life makes you feel better about losing Daniel. Some sister you turned out to be. On December 17th, my mother made her final attempt. She didn't call or visit. Instead, she sent me a letter, a handwritten letter, delivered by certified mail, as if she was conducting official business. Dear Sarah, the letter began. I am writing to formally request access to Daniel's trust fund for Jessica's wedding expenses. As Daniel's grandmother, I believe I have moral, if not legal rights, to make decisions about how his memory is honored. Jessica's wedding would be a beautiful tribute to Daniel's spirit, a celebration of life and love that would help our family heal from this tragedy. Your refusal to help your sister in her time of need is causing irreparable damage to our family relationships. I raised you to be generous and loving, not selfish and vindictive. Your behavior since Daniel's death has been disappointing and frankly shocking. I never thought a daughter of mine would use her child's death as a weapon against her own family. If you do not provide the requested funds by December 18th, I will be forced to explore legal options for accessing the trust fund myself. I have consulted with a lawyer who believes there may be grounds for claiming grandparent rights to the money, especially given your current emotional state. Think carefully about what kind of person you want to be, Sarah. Do you want to be remembered as the sister who destroyed Jessica's wedding out of spite? Or do you want to be remembered as someone who turned tragedy into something beautiful? The choice is yours, but time is running out. It was signed, with disappointed love, mother, grandparent rights to the money, legal options, emotional state. She was threatening to have me declared mentally unfit, so she could steal my son's trust fund. That night, I called Mrs. Patterson. I'd like to move forward with the scholarship fund announcement. I said, tomorrow morning. Are you sure about the timing? I'm sure. And you understand that once I file these papers, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment they chose champagne over my son's funeral. On December 18th, at 9 a.m., Mrs. Patterson filed the paperwork with the probate court to establish the Daniel John Memorial Scholarship Fund for children battling cancer. The entire $950,000 trust fund was transferred to an irrevocable charitable foundation, every penny of it. At 9:15 a.m., I sent identical text messages to my mother, my sister, and every family member who had pressured me about the money. The Daniel John Memorial Scholarship Fund has been established as of this morning. The entire trust fund, all $950,000, has been permanently donated to provide educational scholarships for children who have survived cancer. The money is no longer accessible to anyone for personal use. I thought you'd want to know before Jessica's wedding tomorrow, so you can make appropriate arrangements. Sarah. My phone exploded. The first call came from Jessica at 9:18 a.m. She was screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What did you do? What the hell did you do? My wedding is tomorrow. The vendors need payment today. You ruined everything. You destroyed my life. I hung up. The second call came from my mother at 9:23 a.m. Sarah Elizabeth John. You tell me right now that this is some kind of sick joke. You did not just steal Jessica's wedding money and give it away to strangers. You fix this right now. Do you hear me? You call that lawyer and you fix this immediately. The money was never Jessica's, I said calmly. It was Daniel's, and now it's going to help children who survive what Daniel couldn't, just like he would have wanted. Don't you dare, my mother started. But I hung up on her too. The calls kept coming. Jessica called 8 more times. My mother called 12 times. Mark called twice. My Aunt Linda called 4 times. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had my number and very strong opinions about my decision. I turned off my phone and sat in Daniel's room, surrounded by his books and toys and drawings. For the first time since his funeral, I felt something that wasn't pain or rage or emptiness. I felt peaceful. If you're still watching this and you think what I did was right, or if you think I went too far, please let me know in the comments. And subscribe if you want to hear what happened at Jessica's wedding, because the fallout was even more dramatic than I expected. Jessica's wedding was supposed to start at 4 p.m. on December 19th. I know this because at 3:30 p.m., my phone, which I had finally turned back on, started buzzing with notifications from social media. Jessica had posted a public announcement on Facebook. It is with heavy hearts that Mark and I must postpone our wedding due to unexpected financial circumstances caused by a family member's selfish actions. We are devastated, but hopeful that we can reschedule once we figure out alternative arrangements. Thank you for your understanding during this difficult time. The comments section was a battlefield. Friends and extended family members who didn't know the full story were expressing shock and sympathy. But a few people who knew about Daniel's recent death, were asking pointed questions. Wait, didn't your nephew just pass away? One comment read. Shouldn't the family be focusing on supporting Sarah right now, instead of planning weddings? I'm confused, wrote another. Didn't Sarah just bury her son? What financial circumstances could be more important than that? Jessica responded to these comments with increasing desperation. Family is supposed to support each other. My wedding was supposed to be a celebration of life after tragedy. Some people are too selfish to understand that. But the tide was turning. More and more people began commenting with variations of the same sentiment. Planning a lavish wedding while your sister grieves her dead child is inappropriate at best. By evening, Jessica had deleted the post entirely. That same night, I received a text from Mark. I hope you're happy. Jessica's been crying for 6 hours straight. The venue kept our deposit $15,000 down the drain. The caterer is threatening to sue us. Jessica's dress is hanging in the closet, with the tag still on because we can't return it. You destroyed the most important day of her life because you wanted to play the victim. Play the victim. The woman whose son died was playing the victim. At 11 p.m., my mother sent me a long email titled, Final Communication. Sarah, what you have done is unforgivable. You've stolen money that rightfully belonged to this family and given it away to strangers out of pure spite. You have destroyed your sister's wedding, humiliated our family publicly, and shown your true colors as a vindictive, selfish person who cares more about her dead son than her living family. Since Daniel's death, you have used your grief as an excuse to punish everyone around you. You made his funeral about your own drama instead of celebrating his life. You refused to participate in family celebrations because you wanted everyone to be as miserable as you are. And now you've stolen money that could have brought joy and happiness to the family, and you've thrown it away just to hurt us. I raised you better than this. Your father would be ashamed of the person you've become. Daniel would be heartbroken to know that his death turned his mother into someone so cold and cruel. Until you find a way to fix what you've done and make amends to Jessica, you are no longer welcome in this family. Don't call me. Don't visit. Don't expect to be included in family gatherings. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I hope the money you gave away was worth losing your entire family. I read that email 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Mrs. Patterson with a note. Is this enough evidence of attempted emotional manipulation for your records? She wrote back within an hour. More than enough. Keep documenting everything. Over the next week, the family siege intensified. They tried every angle they could think of. My cousin Mike sent me legal documents he'd printed off the internet, claiming that I could be sued for misappropriation of family assets. When I showed them to Mrs. Patterson, she laughed so hard she snorted. My Aunt Linda started a rumor that I was having a mental breakdown and wasn't capable of making sound financial decisions. She actually called Daniel's former pediatrician to ask if grief could make someone legally incompetent. The pediatrician's office called me to verify that they should not be discussing my mental state with anyone. Jessica's future mother-in-law called me directly, explaining that their family had spent $3,000 on flights and hotels for the wedding, and that I owed them reimbursement for their damages. When I pointed out that I didn't cancel their travel plans, she accused me of being technically correct, but morally bankrupt. But the most revealing attack came from my sister herself. On December 26, exactly 1 week after her cancelled wedding, Jessica published a blog post titled, "When Grief Becomes Greed, How My Sister Used Her Son's Death to Destroy My Life." In the post, Jessica painted herself as the victim of my unstable grief response. She claimed that I had always been jealous of her happiness and had used Daniel's trust fund as a weapon of revenge. She described the money as family savings that I had stolen and given away to make a point. But here's the part that still makes my blood boil. She wrote an entire section about how Daniel would have wanted his aunt to be happy and how my actions went against his loving, generous spirit. She claimed that Daniel used to talk about her wedding and how excited he was to be the ring bearer. Daniel had never been asked to be the ring bearer. Jessica had told him he was too young to have a role in the wedding, and that he could maybe help with something small if he was well enough by December. She had actively excluded him from her wedding plans, but now she was using his memory to make herself look like the victim. The blog post got shared hundreds of times. I started receiving messages from strangers telling me I was a terrible person, that I should be ashamed of myself, that I was dishonoring my son's memory. That's when I realized my family wasn't just trying to get money from me. They were trying to destroy my reputation so thoroughly that I'd be forced to give them what they wanted just to make it stop. They were wrong again. Please subscribe and comment where you're watching from if you want to know how this story really ends, because what I did next wasn't just revenge. It was justice. On January 2nd, I did something I should have done months earlier. I wrote my own blog post, but unlike Jessica's fiction, mine included receipts. I titled it, "The Truth About My Family's Christmas, How They Chose My Sister's Wedding over my son's funeral." I started with the timeline. November 3rd, Daniel died. November 8th, the funeral that my family skipped to attend Jessica's engagement party. I included screenshots of the social media posts from that day, my mother and sister celebrating, while I buried my child alone. I included the text message my mother sent me on funeral night, demanding access to the trust fund, and telling me to stop being dramatic about the funeral thing. I included excerpts from the voicemails and emails, where family members called my grief dwelling on the dead, and accused me of being vindictive for not immediately handing over my son's money. I included my mother's letter threatening to have me declared mentally unfit so she could access the funds herself. I included the legal documentation showing that the trust fund was never family money. It was specifically designated for Daniel's welfare and education. with clear provisions for charity donation in the event of his death. And I included a detailed breakdown of Jessica's wedding expenses. $75,000 for a single day of celebration, planned and committed to while she knew her nephew was dying. But most importantly, I included information about the Daniel John Memorial Scholarship Fund. I explained that the money would provide educational assistance to children who had survived cancer, kids who, unlike Daniel, would get the chance to grow up and use their education to build meaningful lives. I ended the post with a simple statement. My family believes that my son's death should have made me more generous with his money. They're right. The most generous thing I could do was ensure that his legacy would help children live the life he couldn't. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, my post had been shared over 2,000 times. Comments poured in from strangers, cancer survivors, bereaved parents, and people who had experienced similar family betrayals. The support was incredible. But more importantly, the truth was finally out there. Local news stations picked up the story. Childhood cancer advocacy groups shared it on their platforms. The Children's Hospital where Daniel had been treated reached out to thank me for the scholarship fund and asked if they could feature his story in their newsletter. But the most meaningful response came from a woman named Maria, whose 2-year-old daughter had just finished cancer treatment. She wrote, "My daughter Emma saw your story and wanted me to tell you that she's going to study extra hard because she wants to honor Daniel's scholarship when she gets to college. She says Daniel must have been a very brave boy to help kids he never got to meet." That's when I cried for the first time since the funeral. Not tears of rage or pain, but tears of something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. My family, predictably, did not take the truth well. Jessica immediately published a response post accusing me of cyberbullying and public humiliation. She claimed that I had manipulated the timeline to make her look bad, and that the engagement party date was just a coincidence. My mother started calling mutual friends and extended family members, trying to convince them that my post was full of lies and that I was having a psychotic break. Several relatives called me to say they'd been contacted by my mother, who was asking them to stage an intervention and force me to get help. But something had shifted. The people who called me weren't calling to criticize. They were calling to apologize. Cousins who had pressured me about the money were suddenly claiming they'd been misled by my mother and sister. Aunts who had accused me of being selfish were now saying they never understood the full situation. My Uncle Tom, who hadn't spoken to me since the funeral, called to say, "Sarah, I had no idea they planned that party on Daniel's funeral day. That's beyond the pale. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you." Even some of Jessica's friends began reaching out privately to express their discomfort with the situation. One of her bridesmaids messaged me, "I always thought the timing of the engagement party was weird, but Jessica said you were okay with it. I'm horrified to learn the truth." By the end of January, Jessica had deleted her blog post entirely. My mother had stopped calling mutual relatives. The family pressure campaign had collapsed under the weight of public scrutiny. But they weren't done yet. In February, I received legal papers. Jessica and my mother were suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress and defamation. They claimed that my blog post had caused them severe psychological damage and irreparable harm to their reputations. They were asking for $500,000 in damages, more than half of what Daniel's trust fund had contained. When I showed the lawsuit to Mrs. Patterson, she smiled grimly. "They're about to learn a very expensive lesson about the legal system," she said. "Everything you wrote in that blog post is documented fact. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. And as for emotional distress, well, let's just say they're going to have a hard time explaining to a judge why they deserve sympathy for the consequences of their own documented behavior." The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice in April. The judge's written opinion included a scathing rebuke of my family's actions, noting that attempting to profit from a child's death and then seeking legal remedy when exposed for such behavior demonstrates a troubling lack of moral judgment. Jessica and my mother were ordered to pay my legal fees, $8,000. They never paid. I didn't pursue it. The victory wasn't about money, it was about truth. If you've made it this far in my story, and you believe that some betrayals can't be forgiven, please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because I want to end this story by talking about what happened next and what peace actually looks like. It's been 14 months since Daniel died. 14 months since my family showed their true colors. 14 months since I chose my son's memory over their demands. The Daniel John Memorial Scholarship Fund awarded its first scholarship last fall, $10,000, to help a 16-year-old cancer survivor named Michael attend community college to study engineering. The scholarship committee sent me a photo of Michael receiving his award, and I swear he had the same determined expression Daniel used to get when he was working on a difficult puzzle. I haven't spoken to my mother since the lawsuit was dismissed. I haven't spoken to Jessica since her blog post was deleted. I haven't been to a family gathering since Daniel's funeral, and I haven't been invited to one either. At first, the silence felt like punishment. I'd lost my son, and then I'd lost my entire family. There were nights when I wondered if I'd made the right choice, if preserving Daniel's legacy was worth being completely alone. But slowly, I realized something. I wasn't alone. I was just no longer surrounded by people who saw my grief as an inconvenience and my son's death as an opportunity. Real family, the kind worth having, doesn't abandon you on the worst day of your life. Real family doesn't demand that you fund their celebrations while you're planning your child's funeral. Real family doesn't threaten legal action when you honor your son's memory instead of their greed. I've built a new kind of family now. It includes the nurses from Daniel's oncology ward, who still send me updates about former patients. It includes the parents from the support group, who understand what it means to carry this kind of loss. It includes the volunteers from the scholarship fund, who help me review applications from brave kids who are fighting for their futures. Last month, I received a letter from a 4-year-old girl named Sophie, who had received a scholarship. She wrote, "Dear Mrs. John, I never got to meet Daniel, but I feel like I know him because of how his scholarship helped me. I'm going to be a doctor someday, so I can help kids like Daniel and me. Thank you for making sure his story keeps helping people." That letter is framed on my kitchen table now, right next to Daniel's school photo. My mother and Jessica never tried to reconcile. They never apologized for missing the funeral, for their timing, for their demands, or for their behavior afterward. In their minds, I'm still the villain who chose strangers over family. But here's what they never understood. I didn't choose strangers over family. I chose Daniel's future impact over their immediate gratification. I chose to honor his memory in a way that would create lasting meaning rather than temporary celebration. Jessica did eventually get married, by the way. A small ceremony in my aunt's backyard the following summer, paid for with money she and Mark saved over 6 months of actually working for it. I heard about it through the family grapevine. No one expected me to be invited, and I wasn't disappointed. Sometimes people ask me if I regret my decision, if I wish I had just given them the money to avoid all the drama, if I think Daniel would have wanted me to help his aunt. The truth is, Daniel was 9 years old when he died. He was still learning about fairness and consequences, and what it means to do the right thing even when it's hard. But I knew my son. I knew his heart. And I know that if I had sat him down and explained that Aunt Jessica wanted to use his college money for a party while Mummy buried him alone, Daniel would have looked at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "That doesn't sound very nice, Mummy." My son spent his short life sharing everything he had. His toys, his snacks, his laughter, his hugs. He would absolutely have wanted his money to help other children, but he would never have wanted it used by people who couldn't even spare 2 hours to say goodbye to him. The scholarship fund has grown since that initial donation. Other families who lost children have contributed in their own kids' memories. Local businesses have donated. The fund now awards multiple scholarships each year, and there's talk of expanding it to include research grants. Daniel's impact on this world didn't end when he died. It just changed form. That's what my family never understood. They saw death as an ending, a reason to stop thinking about Daniel and start focusing on the living. But death isn't an ending when love remains. Daniel's love continues through every child who gets a chance at education, because his trust fund was preserved for its intended purpose. His love continues through every family that doesn't have to choose between medical bills and college dreams. His love continues through every act of genuine kindness that happens because someone heard his story and decided to be better. My family wanted to turn Daniel's death into Jessica's celebration. Instead, I turned Daniel's life into countless other children's opportunities. That's not revenge. That's legacy. I still miss Daniel every single day. I still cry when I find his drawings hidden in random places around the house. I still wake up sometimes forgetting he's gone and calling his name before I remember. But I don't carry anger anymore. Not toward the cancer that took him, and not toward the family that betrayed me. Anger is exhausting, and I need my energy for better things. I need it for healing, for building the scholarship program, for making sure Daniel's story helps people understand the difference between supporting someone through grief and exploiting someone through grief. I've learned that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I was lonely when I was surrounded by family members who saw my son's death as their opportunity. I was lonely when I was pressured to perform gratitude for people who couldn't be bothered to show up for the hardest day of my life. But I'm not lonely anymore, even though I'm alone, because I'm surrounded by Daniel's love, and by the love of people who understand what really matters. I'm surrounded by the knowledge that I did right by my son, even when it cost me everything else. If you believe that grief should never be exploited, that children's legacies deserve protection, and that some betrayals are simply unforgivable, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because I want to know that Daniel's story is reaching people who understand the difference between family by blood and family by choice. Some betrayals don't deserve silence. Some stories need to be told. And some love, like the love between a mother and her son, is so strong that not even death can diminish it. Thank you for listening to Daniel's story. Thank you for understanding why I made the choice I made. And thank you for helping me ensure that his legacy will continue helping children long after the people who tried to exploit his memory have been forgotten. My son taught me that love means putting someone else's needs before your own. My family taught me that not everyone understands that lesson, but the children who will benefit from Daniel's scholarship fund, they'll understand. They'll carry his love forward in ways my family never could. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's love. That's legacy. And that's enough.